Gute Woche, Zev. Continuing learning in Avodah Zarah Perek Beis. Mishnayos Avodah Zarah Perek Beis. The halacha assumes that pagan societies, the societies that were based on Avodah Zarah, would tolerate a variety of terrible acts. And the Chachamim therefore enacted a number of halachas, a number of gzeros, to prevent Jews from having any part in these gruesome and terrible acts, as well as to prevent Jews from falling victim to the immoral and murderous acts of Avodah Zarah, who did not live with any sense of what we would refer to today as law and order. So the Mishnah says, Ein ma'amidim behema bepuntukois shelo yivdikachovim. A person may not leave his animal in the stables of inns that are owned by idolaters. Why is that? Because Avodah Zarah are suspect of committing bestiality, of having relations with animals. Now, an important note here is that the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach that were given to Noach and his generation after they came out of the Teva must be kept by all people, including non-Jews. Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach are focused to create a sense of civility, a normalcy within the non-Jewish community, within the non-Jewish society. Now, one of these halachas, one of the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach, forbids acts of bestiality. At the same time, we need to remember that it is also for a Jew to cause anyone, even an idolater, to sin in any one of the mitzvahs in which he is mechuyav within the Sheva Mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And therefore the Chachamim here in our Mishnah teach us that they answered leaving an animal in the idolater's stable since it may bring him to sin. So explains the Tosfos Yontif. So number one, because chatshudim al reviyah. Secondly, says the Mishnah, a Jewish woman may not be alone with idolaters. Why is that? Because idolaters are suspects of immorality and they might sin with her. And the truth of the matter is that a Jewish woman may not be alone even with a Jewish man, so that they may not come to sin. The Gemara in Kiddushin, the Mishnah in Kiddushin, Perek Daled, Mishnah Yud Beis. However, in certain cases, for example, if a man's wife is present, it is permitted, because we assume that the Jewish man will not sin with a woman when his wife is there. An idolater, however, on the other hand, might sin with a woman even with his wife present. And therefore, our Mishnah teaches that a woman may not be alone with idolaters even if their wives are present. And thirdly, a Jewish man may not be alone with idolaters. Again, why may he not be alone? Because idolaters are suspects of committing murder. This concern was not given as a reason that a woman may not be alone with an idolater, because we don't suspect that the idolater would murder women. Tosfos Yontif explains, because women by nature arouse greater compassion among men, even those who are of the Avodah Zarah. The concern that the idolater may kill the Jew existed, let's take note, only in places where the government was lax in punishing those who commit murder. In places where the government deals harshly with killers, where there is law and order, where there is governmental legislation about a variety of acts that are unacceptable, there it would be permissible to be alone with an idolater. The key point is that these halachas pervade where Avodah Zarah live a hefker, without law and order, without legislation, without governmental controls. Weiter says the Mishnah, Bas Yisrael, the Mishnah now lists additional isurim, additional prohibitions that were established by the Chachamim so that we should have no part in furthering the cause of idolatry. That's the next set of halachas. There should be no part in furthering Avodah Zarah among mankind. So therefore, a Jewish woman may not assist in idolaters giving birth. Why? Because she's bringing about an Avodah Zarah. She's assisting in the birth of a child who will be an Avodah Zarah. But we may have an idolatress assist a Jewish woman in giving birth. The Mishnah refers here, of course, to a midwife who is serving without pay. She can excuse herself from delivering the baby of an idolatress by saying that she cannot assist her, that she's too busy earning a living. However, if she is normally paid for her services and the idolatress offers to pay as well, she may deliver the baby of the idolatress, since her refusal may cause further hatred. Further hatred. As far as the Bas Yisrael, as far as Oivedis Kachovim Yaledis Bas Yisrael, then when the midwife delivers the child under the supervision of other Jewish women, it's acceptable. However, if other women are not present, it is still also because we suspect that the idolatress may harm the Jewish woman. Weiter says the Mishnah, likewise, a Jewish woman may not nurse the child of an idolatress because she's feeding a child who will end up performing idolatry. And likewise, but an idolatress may nurse the child of a Jewish woman in the mother's home, birshusa, in the mother's home. However, we may not have the idolatress nurse the baby in the idolater's own home. Again, because we suspect that they would harm the Jewish baby. Says the Mishnah Vayter. The Mishnah continues with the halacha, with the law regarding using a veterinarian, a doctor, or a barber who was an idolater. A well-known Mishnah. An important Mishnah in terms of halachic ramifications. Misrapi mehem ripui momon. We may receive medical treatment from idolaters for our possessions. That is, for our animals. A veterinarian. Misrapi mehem ripui momon. Ripui momon means for our property. What's our property? For our animal, for our livestock. You can use a idolater veterinarian. But we may not receive treatment for our personal illnesses out of concern that the idolater may murder the patient. Now we are concerned that the idolater would administer a treatment that would kill the patient rather than heal him. If he is known, however, to be a skilled physician, since he will not want to ruin his reputation, says the Gemara and Chavches and Sanhedrin. In fact, some maintain that it is permissible to receive treatment from any idolater who is a doctor as long as he's being paid. So says the Ramah in Yeridea. So misrapi mem ripui momon avalo ripui nefoshes. Ve'ein mistaprim mehen b'chol mokum, but we may not take haircuts from idolaters in any place, anywhere, even in a place where other people are present, because we're concerned that the idolater might kill the Jew with his razor. The Tosfos Yontif explains, Divrei Rab Meir, I'm sorry, Ve'ein mistaprim b'chol mokum, Divrei Rab Meir. What's the pshat? The pshat is that Rab Meir is concerned that an idolater will murder the Jew even when others are present. Even when others are present. He has a razor in his hand, so others are present doesn't mean that he would be held back. So, Ein mistaprim b'chol mokum, says Rab Meir. V'chachomim oimrim, but the chachomim say, B'rshus harabi mutar. In the public area, it is permissible to take haircuts from idolaters because they are afraid to commit murder where other peoples are present. Avalo beino leveino, but it is not permitted, according to the Chachomim, to take haircuts from them in private because they're not afraid to commit murder in private. They're not afraid to commit murder in private, which Rab Meir also agrees with, but Rab Meir goes further. Rab Meir is machmir and says, b'chol mokum, anywhere, even if they're people. If he has a razor in his hand, who knows what he's going to do? The Chachomim are makil to say this is the B'rshus harabim, it's mutar, but only beino do we have to go so far and be afraid. In other words, when the Chachomim prohibit taking a haircut from an idolater in private, it doesn't mean that the Jew is totally alone with the idolater. Why can't it mean that? Because we learned in Mishnah Aleph that in any case one may never be alone with an idolater. We saw in Mishnah Aleph. Rather, in private, beino lebeino means any place where other people are not always present. Since the idolater holds a razor in his hand, as I said, we're concerned that if he's left alone with the Jew for even a moment, he may slit the Jew's throat, and who knows what kind of sakana will come about. Okay, let's learn one more Mishnah. I assume you learn at your own pace, so the Mishnah is here. It's available for whenever you get to it. The Hakdama to this important Mishnah is that the Torah prohibits having hanoah, having benefit from an item that was brought as an offering to idolaters, to idolatry, to Avodah Zarah. So now the Mishnah lists items that are prohibited in benefit, that are also be'anoah, because they may have been offered to an idol. That is the title of the Mishnah. The following items of idolaters are prohibited to Jews, and moreover, the Isur on Isur Hanoah, and their prohibition forbids having benefit from them as well. The Isur to use it, and the Isur to derive hanoah from it. Number one, we all know, is hayayin. Hayayin. It's also midoraisa. It's an Isur Torah to have benefit from wine that was poured as a libation for sacrificial use of Avodah Zarah, that was used as a libation to an idol. This is what is known as Yain Nesech. Yain Nesech is libation wine. Wine used to be offered as a libation, as an isur to an idol, to an Avodah Zarah. Now, b'yameinu we don't really have Yain Nesech per se. So the Chachomim extended, the Chachomim prohibited drinking any kind of goyish wine, any kind of idolatrous wine, and that is what we refer to as stam yenam. Stam yenam. When you go into a wine store and there's gallo wine there, gallo wine is not yain nesech. Yain The gala wine is stam yena. Their ordinary wine, stam wine, which is produced by goyim. And the Chachamim answered it in order to prevent Jews from socializing with idolaters, which could then lead to intermarriage. That is really the core issue and the core issue of Stam Yenam. That alone, however, would be reason only to prohibit drinking the wine. The Chachamim, however, extended the issue and answered also having hano, deriving hano from wine of idolaters as well, because they were concerned that it may actually be nesach wine. Nevertheless, the Chachamim would not have prohibited the wine due to the concern of nesach wine alone, since Avodah Zarah, since idolaters who poured wine as libation for their idols would usually not give or sell that wine to a Jew. It was too precious for them. An extension of this, which we find in Mishnah Dalet, which we find in Perek Dalet Mishnah Yud later on, an extension of this is the Isur D'Rabbanan that prohibits even the wine of a Jew that was touched by a goy, that was touched by an idolater. Okay, I hope that explains it clearly. So here we have Elu Dvorim Shelo Yivdu Kochovim Asurim V'Yisuran Isurano. Number one is Yain. And number two, V'Achoymet Shelo Yivdu Kochovim Shemitchiloso Yain, vinegar of idolaters, which began as wine, but became vinegar. That became vinegar. What does that mean? Wine of an idolater that totally fermented and turned into vinegar. So since it was already prohibited as yain esech, as yain of goyim, when it was wine, it remains prohibited even after it ferments and becomes vinegar. On the other hand, an important footnote, on the other hand, if a Jew owned wine that turned into vinegar, which he then sold to an idolater, it's permissible, it's permitted to have hano from that vinegar. Why? Because the wine was never also to start with. It was wine of a Jew, since it was the wine of a Jew. And there's no reason to prohibit the vinegar once the idolater bought it, because idolaters do not use vinegar in their libation, the Rav explains. An important yesod. They don't use vinegar as their libation. And that further reinforces why, if the Jew had wine to start with and it turned into vinegar, there's no yisur hano from it. So, vinegar of idolaters, says the Mishnah, which began as wine and became vinegar. And weiter v'cheres hadrioni, Hadrianic earthenware which had wine absorbed into it. The Roman Emperor Hadrian would have pieces of pottery formed from clay made with wine instead of with water, which was then dried without being baked in an oven. His soldiers would take these pieces of pottery, known as Hadrianic earthenware, they would take them with them to war. And when they wanted to drink, they would put them in water, the clay would dissolve, and the solid pieces would sink to the bottom of the utensil, having a wine drink. You see, they never gave up on having a drink, even when they were at war. So since Hadrianic earthenware, al pi halacha, is thoroughly saturated with wine, it is considered no different from the actual wine itself of an Avodah Zarah, and is also behano. It's also behano. Look, the Rav explains it very nicely. In the middle, ve'atit shoker lamata, ve'nishar hayayin mozug b'mayim, ve'al shem Adrianus nikra cheres Hadriani. And the last item the Mishnah lists is v'oiros levuvim, animal hides with heart openings, which show that the animal was brought as an offering to idolaters, to Avodah Zarah. What is this? The idolaters in those days would cut open the chest of a live animal and remove its heart, which they would then bring as an offering to the Avodah Zarah. So the status of such an animal is no different from an animal that is slaughtered for an idol. And the entire animal, including its hide, becomes forbidden, becomes osur behano. So Rab Shimon ben Gamliel adds a footnote here. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, as far as this oiros halevuvim, as far as these animal hides with the heart openings, which indicates that this was brought Avodah Zarah, that is only bisman shakera shelo ogul is also only if its cut is round. If its cut was round, says Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, it was cut for the sake of idolatry, and the hide is prohibited. But if it's moshuch, it's mutar. But if the cut is long and narrow, it was not cut for the sake of idolatry, because they would not cut it that way for the Avodah Zarah, and therefore the hide would be mutar be'ano. The custom of the idolaters was to cut the opening in the animal's chest in a circular shape. Whatever, that was the form of the Avodah Zarah. That was the derech of Avodah Zarah. So according to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, if the opening was not circular, so then we can assume that it was cut for some other purpose, and therefore is mutar be'ano. You see what the Rav says? Moshuch mutar, says Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Says the Rav, she'ein oisin l'Avodah Zarah elo ogul. The derech of the Avodah Zarah was only to count it, to cut it in a circular form. And the halacha is, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, says the Rav, and therefore it would be mutar be'ano, big nafkamina, for business and so forth. One more item that the Mishnah says now is basar anichlas l'Avodah Zarah mutar. Having benefit from meat that is being brought in by idolaters to be offered in a place of idolatry is mutar, because it was not yet offered to the Avodah Zarah. But v'hayoytze, having benefit from meat that is taken out of a place of idolatry, is also mipnei shehu kezivchei meisim, since it's considered sacrifices of the dead. Sacrifices of the dead means it's considered Avodah Zarah, since we can assume that all meat being taken out was already offered to the Avodah Zarah. All meat taken in may still derive benefit from, because it was not yet offered to Avodah Zarah. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, as I said, Rabbi Akiva. So the Mishnah discusses the halacha of doing business with idolaters who are on a pilgrimage to and from the temples of idolatry. It's forbidden to do business with idolaters going on a pagan pilgrimage. They're on the way to their temples of Avodah Zarah, because they will go and give thanks to the idols for their successful dealings. We saw such as well earlier in the beginning of Aleph, Perek Aleph. On the way there, can't do business with them, because they'll be so happy. Look at this money I made off the Jews. They'll give thanks to the Avodah Zarah. But it's permissible to do business with those coming back from their places of idol worship, since we need not be concerned that they will return to the idol to give off to them. They're not going to be matriach to go back to say shakoyach to the idol. Right? As far as when they're on the way. So again, the Mefoshim point to the fact that at the beginning of Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, we learned an important klal, an important halacha, that we may not do something that will be the reason as to why the idolater will give thanks and gratitude to his Avodah Zarah. Okay.